Do we have free speech in the UK, or is Keir Starmer gaslighting the whole of the world when he says we've had free speech in the UK for a long time? He's very proud of it, and we will have free speech in the UK for a very long time. I hope to have a very frank discussion with you in this video. We are here on Black Belt Secrets, so very much my opinions, very much my free-flowing thoughts. Please do subscribe if you want my sometimes brutally honest thoughts, which you may not agree with. You're perfectly welcome to disagree with my views on here or anywhere. In fact, this is the whole point of free speech. In fact, I can say something, you can disagree with it. I can say something that offends you, and that's somewhat tough. But if I were to engage in a sort of conduct which is targeting you and designed to harass you on an ongoing basis and cross a threshold which is then grossly offensive and unacceptable, it must be oppressive and unacceptable. That crosses the threshold of what is or is not the exercise of the freedom of expression, which we have the right to under Article 10. So please do subscribe to the channel if you want this brutal and honest approach. So what are we talking about and what's prompted this video? Well, obviously, Mike Amesbury has escaped prison time. He has a custodial sentence in the technical sense of the word, but he's walked free. Meanwhile, Lucy Connelly is still in prison, and the other lady that I'm going to talk about later in the video, in the second half of this video, so do stick around for that, Julie Sweeney, is also in prison. Stick around for the second half of the video, I'll talk about those. But first of all, let's go to what really prompted this, and that is this, which will become an infamous little snippet between Keir Starmer and J.D. Vance in the United States. So a bit of a quip against free speech in the UK, and Keir Starmer responds. Let's kick off with this. I'll give you my views, and you're welcome to leave yours in the comments below.
With our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
So something of a backing down with regard to policing X and things like that, and going after US citizens for what they post on X and other platforms, in that Keir Starmer confirms we as a nation, obviously under his leadership, wouldn't want to reach across US systems and by extension US citizens and so on and so forth. That's good to hear, but you may disagree with what he said about we have free speech in the UK for a long time and very proud of it, and we will have it for a long time. On the other hand, you may hold the view that absolutely we do, because we can all go to, we can all take to platforms, we could all say what we think, leave comments, use X, express yourself on there, give your views on there, and that be that. Until it isn't. And this is the problem. This is the real problem that we have here. And the big disparity, in my view, is when people compare what people have gone to prison for and what people have escaped prison for. The direct comparison here is, of course, Mike Amesbury punched a guy, one of his own constituents. Now, this is a member of parliament punching one of his own constituents. And it sounds ridiculous as I say it, but this is exactly what happened. He punched his own constituent who went to the ground. He then repeatedly struck him while he was on the floor. The court heard at least 5 more times. Now, as a martial artist, I used to hang my belt up here somewhere. It's not there at the moment. I am a master 7th degree black belt in Taekwondo, and I've trained in Shaolin Kung Fu. I've trained in close quarters combat. We've taught the army and special forces and things like that how to fight. Now, knowing how to fight is a very core thing to defend yourself. And knowing the boundaries of what is defending yourself and self-defense and reasonable force and so on is very nuanced. But there is, to some of us, quite an obvious line that you can cross. Now, if he had just hit him once, for example, because he genuinely feared immediate unlawful harm, and he pleaded not guilty and self-defense, and the court, be it the magistrate's court or the Crown Court by a jury, if they believed that he genuinely apprehended immediate unlawful harm and hit him in self-defense, that is a full defense, if that's the case. So many of you will be wondering whether I think this sentence was fair. So I'm going to tell you exactly what I think in a moment. Don't go away. On another note for a moment, let me ask you this. Would you allow a complete stranger to access your laptop whilst your browser is logged into your email and your banking and perhaps other apps? Well, of course not. However, let me explain this. When you log into those things, your browser creates what we call a cookie. It's a small file saving all of the login and the authentication data for you to log into your email, your banking, etc. Now, if someone got hold of that cookie, they can pretend to be your browser, and they will take over that session, as we call it, that is logged into all of those things on your browser, and that is called session hijacking. I just read about some YouTubers that lost their entire YouTube accounts with hundreds of thousands of subscribers to one of these session hijacking. And that is where a partner to my channel, NordVPN, comes in. Because with NordVPN, when you access websites like this or try to download files that contain these hacking malicious softwares that try to access these session cookies and IDs, they try to take over your session, but NordVPN prevents you from doing so. It will flag up malicious websites, malicious downloads, and protect your computer from being hijacked so that they don't get access to your email, your banking, and any other app that you are logged into. And it's not just the active login sessions that these hackers can get hold of either. It's all of your information, including all of the authentication and login details, your name, email, city, password, address, phone numbers, gender, birthdays, all the sort of information that they can then use to steal your identity. NordVPN also comes along with a dark web monitor, that is monitoring the internet for your data that might have been leaked anywhere. They don't keep any logs and they've been independently audited a number of times. And of course, you can install NordVPN on all of your devices. And of course, as a partner to my channel, I get you a fantastic discount, which is 4 months extra free on top of the existing discounts, along with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Just use the code BlackBeltSecrets at the checkout and you'll get that 4 months extra free off the plan that you choose. And of course, you get 30 days to change your mind. But the peace of mind for the small price to pay will be well worth it. So check out NordVPN today, and I thank them for sponsoring this video. Because he hit him, he went to the ground. The threat was neutralized. You should then walk away. And then he repeatedly hit him, and so on and so forth. So for me, that was very much more than a common assault. It was very much more than just a scuffle. It should at the very least have been charged as a fray. And I think he should have done prison time for that. And not just a technical custodial sentence that's now suspended for 2 years. So he follows all the requirements and he behaves himself for 2 years and that's it. He doesn't go to prison. I don't think that's enough. That's my personal view. And you're here for my personal views. Please subscribe for my personal views if you want these to continue. Let me know what you think. Should he have served prison time for that? Because in a roundabout way, the reason I'm talking about this is that is the very stark comparison right now. Because that is the comparison between physical, actual, real violence against another person. And he pleaded guilty to that. I suspect there was some. We're not supposed to really do plea bargaining, but I suspect that it was one of the alternative proposed charges, and that he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge. Perhaps, I'm guessing, and he expected no prison time. Was surprised by the 10-week custodial sentence, and obviously on appeal, that's now been suspended. But it's the comparison between that and posts that people have put online and have actually gone to prison for a lengthy custodial sentence, which I'll come back to why a little bit in this video. And again, I'm going to keep it my views very much throughout this, but I will explain why I think this has got to where we are now. And so if we move first of all to this page here, this was for Lucy Connelly. This is the police summary of what happened here. And I will give you my view as to why I think we've ended up in this position where you can say something on social media and be prosecuted and end up in prison for a lengthy custodial sentence, whereas physically beating someone up, you walk out. And it's all down to the sentencing guidelines and the way that these sentences are prosecuted. But even before we get to that, let's move to this page here. I did a poll 3 hours ago and said, Keir Starmer said he's proud of our free speech in the UK. Do we really have free speech in the UK? This is for me to sort of garner a general view from the viewership of my main channel, Black Belt Barrister. If you're not familiar who I am, that's what I'm talking about. Pop over there and subscribe as well. 15,000 votes and 97% said no. We don't really have free speech in the UK. Now, arguably, there are hundreds of comments against this post here. There are thousands of comments on other videos that I've released and so on. And therefore, you could argue we do have free speech. You can just post anything you like. But that comes to a point, because when you post something like Lucy Connelly did here, I don't condone what she posted. I don't like what she posted. I don't think it's right that she posted that. And I'm not defending her posting that at all. The difference here is, should she really have gone to prison for that? When she didn't actually physically go and do anything. She just made an awful comment. And that comment was viewed 310,000 times, which will be important a little bit later. Now, as to what she actually said, she said, set fire to all the effing hotels full of the bees for all I care, and then said, if that makes me racist, so be it. Now, of course, that's wrong. We all know that's wrong, and we all know we shouldn't say things like that. But as noted by her defending barrister, who said whatever her intention was in posting the offending tweet, it was short-lived, and she didn't expect the violence that followed. And she quickly tried to quell it. So she deleted the tweet some 3 hours later. But as you'll see very shortly from the sentencing guidelines and from the offence of elements, that didn't really matter. And so the reason we have this disparity between the two is that the way these offences are prosecuted and the sentences they attract. And I think that's quite a problem. Because if we all look at this fairly objectively, bearing in mind she pleaded guilty, which puts a different spin on the whole thing, but let's look at this objectively. Everybody was frustrated after the Southport attack. And lots of people made assumptions as to who did it and what their background was and what their faith was and culture and what influenced them and all that sort of stuff. A lot of people made assumptions about that. And we still don't really know for sure exactly what the motive was, etc. But lots of people speculate. And it was that speculation and the unknown and the frustration and all of that combined that made people post these things. And therefore, some people, like Lucy Connelly, posted things like this, set fire to the hotels, and if that makes me racist, so be it. Obviously, that's wrong. Obviously, she shouldn't post that. But did she really, really mean that post? Did she literally mean for somebody to go and do that? Well, most of you, I presume, would probably guess that she didn't literally mean it. Or maybe she did. And that's the problem here. Because she pleaded guilty to the offence. Now, if she'd have pleaded not guilty and run this case to, because it's an either way offence, if she ran this case to the Crown Court, had a jury, and then trusted in the jury that she didn't really mean it, it was just a mistake, it was short-lived, etc. Because remember, there's been a recent case where a judge had said something similar about someone who was then facing deportation, and the judge said, well, it was a short-lived thing, never mind, effectively. But as Lucy's barrister said here, whatever her intention was, it was short-lived. She didn't expect the violence that followed, and she deleted it, tried to quell it. Now, that's sort of the point here. She didn't expect that sort of violence that followed. So then if we take a look at the offence itself, which is Section 19 of the Public Order Act 1986, and I promise this won't turn into a legal education video. These are still my views here, but it's important to get the context of this so that you do understand it. Publishing or distributing written material which is threatening, abusive, or insulting if the person intends to stir up racial hatred or, having regard to all the circumstances, racial hatred is likely to be stirred up thereby. So by publishing such a thing to go and burn the hotels, etc., if that makes me racist, and the combination of those two comments there clearly, having regard to all the circumstances, which also included the riots that were going on at the time, racial hatred was likely to be stirred up. And so, because that was likely to be stirred up, she was probably advised that she should plead guilty, because she was probably advised that having regard to all the circumstances, the post that she made was likely to stir up racial hatred. Given the circumstances, given the nature, etc., it wasn't just a simple case of, I'm against the UK immigration policies, for example, or things like that. I don't think we should take as many immigrants to the UK, etc. That's not the same thing. This sort of post is directly inciting or being reckless or etc. as to whether or not racial hatred is likely to be stirred up. And the defence under subsection 2 wouldn't really apply either, because that is where someone accused of this is not shown to have intended to stir up racial hatred, to prove that he was not aware of the content of the material and did not suspect and had no reason to suspect that it was threatening, abusive, or insulting. And obviously that's not correct here. But these few offences under section 19, section 18, again, which is use of words, behaviour, etc., and then again under section 20. But then we move to the sentencing guidelines, which is really why we have this massive disparity between going to prison for something like this and not going to prison for the common assault. Aside from how it's charged, which I do have a problem with. I do have a problem that it was only charged as common assault. And I think many people, given the outcome, would probably agree with that. Again, let me know in the comments if you agree with that. But looking at the Sentencing Council guidelines for racial hatred offences, now it is right, I stress, it is right that we take a strong stance against racial hatred. Whatever your views on other cultures, whatever your views on immigration, all that sort of stuff, it is wrong to incite others to hate people because of their background, and it is wrong for you to publish things like that. So it is right that there are guidelines along these offences. But as I say, this is the reason that there's a huge disparity, because when you look at what's available for this offence, this is tribal either way out of the gate, whereas the common assault was tribal in the Magistrates' Court. And the racial hatred offences, which include all those under the Public Order Act, sections 18 to 23 and 29B to 29G, the maximum available here is 7 years custody. So I'm going to go through this and examine and explain why I think Lucy Connelly's sentence ended up as it is. And let's look at the table here for determining the offence category, which is how the judge arrives at a sentence in this case. Now, bearing in mind, as I said before, she pleaded guilty, which means, yes, I did do that. I did intend to stir up racial hatred by posting that thing. And that's what she did. That's what she said. She pleaded guilty. So the judge is going off the assumption here that she is guilty of the offence charged, and takes all of that into account, all of the circumstances into account, and then looks to this table here, starting with culpability. So if you're not familiar by now, it's determined by culpability and harm. And the combination produces a table, not in every single offence, but most offences now have got this table, and we start to look at these. So high culpability would be where an offender uses a position of trust, authority, or influence to stir up hatred. So for example, take a news presenter, perhaps, a position of trust, authority, and influence. If they were to make such a statement, which sounds ridiculous even when I say it, but if one of those were to make such a statement on air, live broadcast to millions of people, clearly that would be high culpability. Intention to incite serious violence is another level of high culpability, which could well come into play here with Lucy Connelly's case. Now, again, there's a disparity here between what did she really mean and what was the real effect? Because many of you might think that she didn't really mean for that to happen. But at the same time, she made the comment, and therefore you have to take it on face value. Very often you have to take these things on face value. It's a bit like when you make a statement in court, some people say, well, the court would never believe you. Well, the court starts from a position of believing you, but then if there's something that shows that you're being inconsistent or you lack credibility or change your story, something like that, then the court chooses not to believe you. That's how it works. So very often you have to take these things on face value. So intention to incite serious violence. So break that apart. The intention bit, she pleaded guilty. And so she pleaded guilty to intentionally posting that thing to stir up serious violence, because that would be serious violence. But even if it didn't quite make it into the high culpability, lesser culpability is just reckless. So it would at the very least fall between the two. So it's at the very least a category B, if not creeping into category A. But erring on the safe side, they might well have landed at category B for culpability. Category C is just being reckless. So you just to hell with it, just post it, don't really care whether it has that effect or not. That's reckless. You recognize that the risk exists and you continue regardless. That's reckless. So this probably fell somewhere between the two, if not edging into A, but probably on the safer side, they stuck with B. Then we look at harm. Now, the statement, the publication, the performance, or the broadcast, because remember all those different offences, sections 18, 19, 20, 21, it's displaying material, making a comment, distributing something, doing a play, making a broadcast, all those in those separate sections, directly encourages activity which threatens or endangers life. Well, yes, quite clearly, that post on the face of it directly encouraged the activity and or threatened life or endangered life. Bearing in mind, again, she pleaded guilty to the offence. But even if she didn't plead guilty, if she pleaded not guilty, a jury would just be asked to look at this on the face of it. Did that message by itself, did it encourage or threaten an endangering life? Yes, is probably the answer to that as well. The second point is widespread dissemination of the statement, etc. It was viewed over 300,000 times. Therefore, this is quite clearly a category 1 for harm. So even on the lenient side for the culpability, if we then look to category 1B, we look then right in the middle here. We've got a starting point of 2 years custody with a range of 1 to 4 years custody. Bearing in mind the maximum for all the aggravating circumstances that might come in is up to 7 years. But a starting point of 2 years and 1 to 4 years as a range. So that is why, ultimately, because she pleaded guilty, that's the analysis, and therefore she was sentenced to 2 years and 7 months in prison. So the judge started at the starting point, looked at her behaviour afterwards. She clearly had very strong views. She expressed those strong views. There was some indication that she was trying to escape liability and responsibility and so on and so forth, and therefore that those were aggravating factors, and so ended up at 2 years, 7 months in prison. Now, again, you might still think that, well, that was still just a post, and compared to punching somebody in the street, that's wrong. And I agree that the difference is wrong. The difference is wrong. But if you disagree with the particular sentence for this particular offence, it's the sentencing guidelines that you look to, not even the judge, because a lot of people will criticise the judge in this case and say the judge shouldn't have done that. But that's frankly wrong, because the judge is following the guidelines. And if the judge doesn't follow the guidelines, then the sentence will be appealed because the judge went outside of the guidelines and therefore it was wrong. So these sentencing guidelines are what you need to look to. But here we've got what we call system and reality. It's my coined phrase, system and reality. The system is, if you take this one offence in isolation, it's developed, it's been drafted, the guidelines have been drafted, and it's wound its way forward. And we say, as a society, we don't want this kind of offence. We don't want people doing this. We want to punish this harshly. And therefore, if someone's convicted or pleaded guilty to this offence, that's what they get. And it is a serious offence, etc. Whereas the reality is this now overlaps with older offences against the person, which are many of the oldest offences. Many of these new sort of racial hatred offences are much, much newer than the very, very old offences against the person, the common assault, the actual bodily harm, and etc. And so in reality, the system being what's developed, and the reality being we now have two very different offences, very different sentences for those offences, and they're being applied side by side pretty much by the court system, and it very much now appears to be a two-tier justice system, because we have someone going to prison for posting something online for 2 years and 7 months, whereas somebody punching someone in the street gets away without going to prison. That's how we've ended up where we are, and that is the problem. There's the system and the reality, and I think that is a serious problem. I think we need to look back at these sentencing guidelines and the offences and how they're charged, and my personal view, again, which is what you're here for, personally, I think if there's no defence, in Mike's case, he pleaded guilty, so obviously there was no defence, and there was mitigation in that he had previous good character, etc., etc. But in my view, if you've punched someone to the ground and you've repeatedly punched them while they're on the ground, it should be a very serious offence. It should be charged as much, and they should be going to prison for it. And I think they should be a lengthy custodial sentence to say, we as a society do not want this behaviour. Because as a society, I mean, I don't want racial hatred in our society, and I don't want people punching people to the ground, much less MPs punching people to the ground in our society. But the two at the moment are so far apart. We have people quite rightly saying, well, we don't have free speech because, you go to prison for these comments, but you don't go to prison for punching someone in the street. And that, in my view, is fueling the divide and the rise of criticism against free speech in the UK. That is what I really think. And that's how I think we got here. We've got this massive disparity between these two offences. You have the likes of Mike Amesbury now walking free from prison. And of course, that girl that threw a milkshake over Nigel Farage, she escaped prison as well. I mean, there was no physical harm there. He may or may not have feared immediate violence. Probably not. But again, should we treat that harshly? Because that was a physical act. It wasn't posting on Facebook or something, somebody go and throw a milkshake over Nigel Farage. She actually went and did it. So how do we compare the two? Should we really be treating that far more seriously than we are when we do treat online comments, publishing material so harshly? And are those sentences correct? Or, whilst we do and we should treat these offences seriously, would it suffice to have maybe 2 or 3 months in prison for things like this, but also bring up the common assault to, make them spend 2 or 3 months in prison? I mean, depending on the categories, etc., there is prison time available for common assault, but should we ensure that these are the sentences that they get? And then perhaps you might be thinking, well, if someone posts something that's really heinous and horrible and really is sort of inciting violence and hatred and so on, posting that on social media, they should get a prison time, but that's somewhat in line with someone who actually physically goes and punches somebody. If they were somewhat in line, 2 or 3 months each, perhaps, I think there would be fewer people complaining that we don't have free speech and that there's a disparity in a two-tier system. These are just observations. These are just discussions. Having been through, my law degrees and being to bar school and practice as a barrister, I've done a reasonable amount of criminal work. I don't do criminal work anymore. We do in the firm and in chambers, but I don't do criminal work anymore. But these are my views, and having trained to do that, these are my views on that. That is why I think we have people that think there's such a disparity. Let me know what you think. I hope you enjoy these sort of rambly view videos. If you do, please do subscribe to the channel. This is Black Belt Secrets, the secrets, if you like, of the Black Belt Barrister. But this channel started as a martial arts channel. If you want to see some of those new ones, let me know in the comments. I will still do those. Obviously, still train. Let me know. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you again next time.